The traditional homelands of the Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian people stretch from the territory of the Gulfyuk-Kagwantan near Yakutat in the north, all the way to Haida Gwaii, the traditional territories of the Haida in British Columbia. We represent over 30 communities, 19 recognized tribes, 12 village corporations, and 5 additional village corporations that should be in existence but weren't originally founded in ANCSA, but yet are still fighting for their land and their right to be village corps in their home communities of Wrangell, Tenakee, Ketchikan, Haines, and Petersburg. In the early 1900s, the Alaska Native Brotherhood was formed. This organization was originally formed to fight as a civil rights organization and an organization that was going to get our lands back. They strongly believed that the lands that we've always lived in for over 10,000 years should be recognized, and we should have title to land in our own territory. From that point, the A&B and the Alaska Native Sisterhood have fought for our civil rights. That led to the creation of the Central Council of Tlingit and Haida Indian Tribes of Alaska in 1935, which led all the way to the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act in 1971, the formation of the 12 regional corps and over 200 village corps throughout Alaska. The Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian people have lived in Southeast Alaska for over 10,000 years. Through ice ages, we've migrated into the interior of Alaska as ice ages have forced us inland, but we've always come home. Each clan has their migration stories, their stories of place, their stories of ownership of land and resources and connection to the wildlife and the oceans and the land that they lived in. They carried deep respect for our environment. They carried deep respect for our values and the perpetuation of those resources, the sustainability of those resources for their grandchildren and their grandchildren's grandchildren. Ha-shu-ka represents that perpetuation, the past, present, and future, and how you carry the wisdom of the past to utilize and benefit the current generations, but always with the mind to carry that forward for the future. Wuchiyach represents balance, reciprocity, and respect, a critical value that has served our people well for over 10,000 years. Haflatzin, our strength, is a core value that provides responsibility to strengthen ourselves and invest in ourselves. And Ha'ani, our homelands, the tie we have, the way we fit into the systems, our lands, our oceans, our rivers. Ha'ani has always been a critical and continues to be a critical value of our people. It speaks to how we want to continue to live sustainably in our traditional communities, harvesting, hunting, fishing, gathering. We need to continue to have access to all the resources that have made our people wealthy and our traditional communities existing. Each of our traditional communities has recent industries, whether it be forestry, commercial fishing, government, tourism. That is what is working in Southeast Alaska right now. We want to continue to grow access to those industries for our traditional communities, and again, maintain the strength of our traditional way of life. In Southeast Alaska, one of the recent things we are most proud about is our ability to work side by side, our tribes, our communities, and our village corps. We know that together we are stronger. Together we can make more positive things happen, strengthening our tribes, strengthening our village corps, strengthening Sealaska through that commitment to work together includes working with the Forest Service. It includes working with the state. It includes every resource available to us that can help us make our community sustainable, that can help create thriving rural communities in Southeast Alaska. Southeast Alaska is an island archipelago. Traditionally, we were connected by canoes, but in current day, we are connected by the Alaska Marine Highway System, a critical resource for our communities that needs to continue to provide the services that they provide. It allows us to have kuiks, traditional parties. It allows communities to gather, and it truly means the survival of our communities. We are hopeful of a vision for the health of our environment, the health of our oceans, the health of our salmon, our deer. We work together as tribes, as village corps, and regional corporations, and urban corporations to make that a reality. We work to bring economic development to our communities. We work together with other organizations that are looking to bring lower cost renewable energy to our communities. And we forever look to protect the rights of our communities to subsist, to hunt and fish and gather as they always have. Every youth in Southeast Alaska whose uncle takes them to check a net, whose aunt teaches them to weave, whose cousins go hunting with them, understands the importance of the tie we have to our land. They learn stewardship, and with that respect, they will work to continue to take care of our ocean and our land, and they will work to maintain those resources that are so critical to us as a people. As Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian people, we've always been willing and happy to have the opportunity to work with all the other tribes and Alaskan Native people. We will work together with other regions as closely as possible and with commitment to the shared vision that we all have to strengthen our culture, our homelands, and our people. Thank you for letting us be part of AFN, and I hope everybody enjoys AFN in this new virtual setting. Gunakchish, Hawa, Doiksib Newsome.
Thank you for joining us today, Anthony. I'd like to introduce our President and CEO for Sealaska, Anthony Milat.
Thank you, Dixie. The video, for all those that watched, I didn't know they were going to play that. We did that for AFN, and just to give all those at that great event, our statewide partners, a sense of who we are in Southeast Alaska. I'm glad to have that chance, but I wanted to make it the story of our shareholders and our communities, and we're always looking to do that at Sealaska. It's my voice, but it's our story, and that's what we try to represent. And that's a good segue into what we're talking about here today. This is the second shareholder event that we have had on the blood quantum eligibility requirement within Sealaska shareholder Class D stock, and just in general, what the blood quantum eligibility means to us. What does lineal descent mean to us? There's a lot of voices out there that we want to hear from. We've heard from so many. The transcriptions, the thought that our shareholders have put into what we've seen so far is just it's really dear to be able to see that. Not only, there's very thoughtful, passionate responses on both sides. And that's what we want to continue to hear. That's why we're trying different formats. Last time the event was at lunchtime and it was an hour. This time the event's in the evening and it's an hour and a half. We'll see how many shareholders we connect with, but I hope our shareholders sense that we're being really honest in our want to not miss any voice that wants to be part of this conversation. And that includes hearing from a broader set of voices from Sealaska as well. And I'm really happy to have the panelists on board with us tonight. And they're going to share a slightly different message than was put forward in the last event. If you want to watch these in sequential order or follow up, I believe all of these are recorded and available to shareholders on mysealaska.com. And our comms team can put some of those links in there. So if you were not able to make the last one, but think this is a topic of importance, we want to make sure you can rewatch this one and also see all of our events. But before I introduce our panelists, I just wanted to give a sense of why this is important. And we've wanted to bring our shareholders along in how we have been utilizing our values to improve our business performance and utilize that business performance, that financial performance, to then turn around and benefit our shareholders in the ways that matter to them most. At the core of the processes we follow is good decision making. And within good decision making, working as a team to make sure that there are no voices or stakeholders that their input is missing. I think we've all been part of a decision where we made the decision and then we found out that we missed something. There was a piece of information that we didn't have that we wish we had before we made that decision. That is how deep we search for data, different voices, truth, understanding, concerns, focus on mitigating the concerns that arise, and then we make the best decision for our businesses, our employees, and our shareholders. And I offer that because that's what we're trying to do with this process here. We need your voices. We need to hear your concerns. If we don't hear your concerns, we may make a decision and not have the right mitigating plans to address those concerns. So this process is a real-time decision-making process with you, our shareholders, and I appreciate the opportunity to be a part of it and the voices that we've heard so far. So to introduce our panelists, I'll start with great appreciation for President Peterson with Tlingit and Haida for his willingness to be part of this story with us, because it's not just the Sealaska story. And I'll allow him to introduce himself quickly, and he'll have greater time when his section comes up. But welcome, President Peterson, Chief How for being with us today.
Chief How Anthony, and before I do introduce myself, I just want to thank Sealaska for having this courageous conversation, one our people need us to be having. I am Chachiaish, Richard Peterson, and I'm president of Tlingit and Haida. I am Tlingit from the Kagwantan clan, from the Eagle's Nest House, from Sitka. I'm child of Haida and Aleut, and I grew up in the Haida village of Kisan in southern Southeast Alaska. And thank you again for allowing me to be here.
Thank you so much. Next is I'll introduce our two directors. They are sitting directors Alaska directors at this point in time, but they had an in-depth knowledge and understanding of the process that went into the creation of the Class D stock. And will be exciting to hear their recollection of the creation, the vote that got us to the Class D stock, because there's so many parallels, there's so many similar conversations to what we are having today. And I will start with Nicole Hollingstad.
Goodness, geez, Anthony. Hi, shareholders. Good evening. Wasa iete. I am Cha'aklaw, Mother Eagle. I'm Raven Sea Pigeon. I was born and raised in Petersburg, and I serve on your board of directors. But from 2003 to 2014, I was also part of a management team at Sea Alaska, and had sort of a firsthand view of many of the discussions that were happening around this issue.
Great, Nicole. Next, Morgan Howard. Welcome.
Thanks, Anthony. Hi, everyone. I belong to the Tequadi clan. My name is Morgan Howard. I'm a director. I've been on the board for about 4 years, originally from Yakutat and Kodiak, but now zooming in from down here in the land of the Duwamish outside Seattle. I did play a role in 2006, 2007 as a vendor for Sea Alaska. If any of you older shoulders remember receiving a DVD in the mail, that's something that I worked on. So I look forward to talking about that effort when we get to that part of the program. Sheesh.
And Jaylene Kukesh, Sea Alaska's policy director and director of legal affairs, is with us. She's vice president and corporate secretary as well at Sea Alaska. Thank you for joining us, Jaylene.
Good afternoon. As Anthony said, I'm Jaylene Kukash, Vice President for Policy and Legal Affairs and Corporate Secretary at Sea Alaska. I've been here for 13 years. I came just on the tail of the vote of the original descendant campaign. So thankful that Nicole and others had that responsibility before I arrived. And I am happy to share some historical background about ANCSA today and available for shareholder questions at any time.
Yes, thank you. And that's, I'll immediately hand it back to Jaylene, but the understanding that this conversation has been with us the entirety of ANCSA's history. And historically, for Native people, goes back well beyond that 50-year history. We have dealt with the BIA blood quantum system for many programs, and there are histories of good and bad within that. Everybody has their own feeling and thoughts on this, but it's not a new conversation, is the message I'm trying to put forward. And again, it's not Sea Alaska's conversation. This is happening across the state, across the nation with tribes, and it has real world effects. The Marine Mammal Protection Act uses cord blood quantum requirements for the ability to harvest marine mammals. And so again, real world effect for our shareholders, for our people at this moment in time. And we want to hear from everybody in terms of not only their thoughts, but how this affects them. And we will start with Jaylene on just the history of ANCSA and the utilization of the blood quantum requirement and some important milestones that occurred within ANCSA that just continued to look to make ANCSA a better law, a better structure for our Native people, and a better partner for all the tribal entities and other partners that we have throughout the state and the region. So, good to cheese, Jaylene.
Thank you, Anthony. Now, I've been told to do ANCSA 101 in 10 minutes, which is a near impossibility. I often can take an hour on this subject, but I'm going to quickly touch on some of the high points for ANCSA I do want to give a shout out to my folks out in Angoon. You can see in the background, some of you might recognize AMB Hall in the background there. I like to have this picture behind me just because of the sunset and because it's Angoon. So hello to my family and all the people from Angoon. So what led to the enactment of the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act, which ultimately created Alaska? Back in the late 60s, the federal government and the state of Alaska were recognizing that there were immense resources in Alaska that they would like to utilize, tap into for the benefit of the state and for the benefit of the federal government. That really sparked the interest in the Alaska Native people who'd always lived in Alaska, who wanted to make sure that their rights were recognized and acknowledged before any others started claiming title to Alaska. We couldn't have other governments coming in and claiming the land that we had lived on since time immemorial. So we did have a contingent of Alaska Natives who were very active around the time of INCSA and even well before INCSA, who sought recognition of and settlement of our rights in Alaska before others could start developing. So with that immense pressure for development and the need to recognize the rights of Alaska Natives, we quickly had enactment of the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act. The process started in 1968 and was passed by December of 1971, which was a very quick turnaround for those of us who do law and policy work. It takes a lot longer than that generally for legislation of this magnitude to be enacted. But you can see how critical it was to the state and federal government to get access to our lands. The resulting settlement was 44 million acres of land and $1 billion for distribution to the 12 regional corporations and then 212 village, urban, and group corporations within Alaska. This legislation also required enrollment of Alaska Natives, all of whom were required to be born before December 19th, 1971, the date that this was signed into law. And they also had to be 1/4 Alaska Native. So Alaska Natives at that time enrolled to a region and identified with a village if they had such an identification. And this settlement was really the primary means by which Alaska Natives received title to our lands. This is the primary way our Tlingit, Haida, and Tsimshian people obtained title to some lands in Southeast Alaska. There is a little bit of tribal ownership within the state and within our region, but it's very small in comparison to the land that was allocated under INCSA. I will say our Alaska Native leadership at the time of INCSA, if you talk to any of them or read any of the history, they were certainly mindful of the impact on the current generation at that time, but were thinking ahead to future generations as well in dealing with the settlement of Alaska Native lands. So with the passage of INCSA, you have 12 regional corporations. Sea Alaska is one of those. We are the regional corporation for Southeast Alaska, and our original shareholder base was roughly 16,000 shareholders. We were one of the few pretty early on, though, who enrolled descendant shareholders. So we now have approximately 23,000 shareholders. And our current land entitlement in Southeast Alaska is around 365,000 acres, which is less than 1% of all INCSA land and a very small portion of our traditional homeland. We have worked very hard over the years to provide benefits to our shareholders, to our state and regional economy, and to manage our lands to the best of our ability with our cultural values in mind for past, present, and future generations. We do have tribes in our region as well. They continue to exist. You'll hear from our own President Peterson shortly. And we do work with them collaboratively on many issues. We share some of the same, many of the same constituents. We have some of the same missions in terms of meeting the needs of our tribal citizens or our shareholders, providing economic development opportunities and meeting the social and economic needs of our people. Since 1971, there's been many amendments to ANCSA. It was pushed through very quickly, so it was pretty much imperfect in many ways. There have been probably nearly 50 amendments to ANCSA since its enactment. Considering we're at 50 years, that seems to fit very well. We also had some very critical amendments in 1987. These were known as the 1991 amendments. These did address important issues that were important to the Native people to ensure that we continue to have ANCSA and our settlement continue in perpetuity. One thing that it did allow was that those who inherited shares would carry voting rights so long as they were a descendant of a Native. So while ANCSA did require those original enrollees to be 1/4, descendants could inherit shares and still have voting rights. There were also amendments to enroll those born after 1991, or born after 1971, excuse me. And so there have been a handful of our regional corporations who have taken advantage of that. We have about half of us who have taken the initiative to have a shareholder vote to include descendant shareholders born after 1971. We also pursued an amendment in collaboration with other corporations to make it a little bit easier to secure an amendment to allow inclusion of descendant shareholders. The original ANCSA required a majority of all outstanding voting stock to adopt additional shares for descendants. And we were able to successfully change that standard to a majority of those voting in an actual election. So we simply need the majority of those who participate in the election, so long as we have a quorum. I actually was working in DC at the time pursuing that, so I was actively involved in that. When we received that amendment, it was nice to work on that directly because I am a descendant shareholder. I do have shares by gift from my dad, Albert Kukash, but I also am a descendant shareholder thanks to the inclusion by Sealaska of those descendants. So that is a kind of quick run through of ANCSA. There's so much more to cover, and we hope to at some point in the future have a more in-depth look back at ANCSA for the benefit of our shareholders and younger generations, and for those in Alaska and outside who don't know much about ANCSA Corporation. So watch for that. But now I'd like to call on Directors Hollingstad and Howard to provide some insights into that 2007 campaign to enroll descendants and other shareholders. We had other categories at the time, but they were involved in that campaign, and they'll be able to share some insights into that process. So I'll hand it off to Director Hollingstad and Howard. Good afternoon.
I'll, listening to you talk, Jillian, remind me of a couple of things. One is how important it is to make the point that the Alaska Native Claims Settlement Act was about land, first and foremost. So it's really, Sealaska is the connection to your ancestral land. And we always got to keep that in mind, because often we get caught up in the corporation mechanics, but really it's the connection to the land. Another thing it reminded me of was built into ANCSA was this 1/4 blood quantum that was needed. But also there was some acknowledgement there with language that lacking proof of that blood quantum, there also would be an exception for those who were regarded as Alaska Native by the village. And to me, that said, well, how are you recognized by your own group? And that speaks to the identity we're talking about today. So I just wanted to say that, then I'll hand it over to Nicole. You can start talking about the 2006, 2007 effort.
Tish Morgan. I do want to acknowledge also, before I begin speaking too much, that I'm connecting from the Dena'ina lands up here in the Anchorage area, and to acknowledge my thanks for being in this place. You mentioned the connection to land that has been present throughout ANCSA. And Jaylene just spent a few minutes talking about the settlement of this piece of legislation and the definitions and the standards that had to be set at that time. Even from 1971 to 1991, when there was an original set of conditions that were supposed to kick in, and collectively groups came together to discuss what those ANCSA amendments might mean to our shareholders, and took some proactive steps to try to keep the corporation from coming to any harm or losing some important provisions. Well, even since ANCSA was passed, there have been issues that have stayed on the minds of successive directors who have come through Sealaska and have wanted to revisit that 1/4 blood quantum standard. So I think it's just important to remind folks that this has been an issue on the mind of Sealaska leadership since ANCSA was passed, through those 91 amendments, and then coming into the late 90s and early 2000s, when Sealaska began to examine creating this Class D stock for its descendants and open those doors to be more inclusive for family members who had been eligible the first time, but for the Class L shares didn't originally get enrolled, and for the Class D shares to be descendants of those original shareholders. And my vantage point as the corporate secretary at that time, I was able to see and help provide materials for and really have a first row seat to the discussions that the board of directors was having, even then, 20 years ago, longer, to think ahead. Sealaska has been talking about having the steps in place for a 100-year plan to look forward to our future generations. And that's always been a part of leadership at Sealaska, is looking ahead to those generations. So that's what the conversation is about now, but it's a nice reminder that it's always been present on the minds of the board. And now we're having the conversation again, because even 20 years later, so many conditions have changed. And Morgan, I know you and I even had a conversation about some of the things that are different now as we look to this issue again. And so, sort of kick it back to you to talk about 20 years later, well, technically 14 years later, we're looking at this issue, but it's almost a new generation of shareholders that we're talking about, and how blood quantum impacts them and what it might mean to them.
So going back, the board started communicating to shareholders in 2004 about this thought about enrolling descendants. Now, the vote didn't happen on the proxy until 2007, but the board started communicating out to shareholders saying, this is what we're thinking about. This is what we've heard from you. Let's start talking about it. And then really in 2006, there was really a great effort to start holding meetings, which were done in that fall of 2006, the winter of 2006, and into the spring of 2007, talking about this issue. Surveys were conducted, focus groups, lots of material, lots of education, because it wasn't just one resolution that was going to be on the proxy. There was actually going to be 3. And also on that 2007 proxy, besides a resolution to allow descendants to be shareholders through this Class D life estate stock, there was also a resolution about providing shares to elders, additional shares, 100 additional shares to elders when they turn 65. Now, the thought process behind that was that the board took into consideration that because adding additional shares would dilute the overall stock, that the elders might be hit the hardest from that, with their dividends decreasing. And so that was put into place then. So a lot of younger shareholders may know of this or they may not, but this is actually something that's been in place. But actually, I guess one correction on that, actually didn't pass the next year. So that one, I could tell you're looking at me like, oh, well, didn't quite pass then. Yeah, it was put on the proxy in 2007, but did not pass until the next year, 2008. But that was the thought process of also introducing those concepts together. But it's very much was a discussion point at that time, what we're discussing now, which is blood quantum. I know the board did discuss whether to keep the 1/4 that was implemented at the beginning of ANCSA or to lower it. And so there was discussions about lowering it to 1/8. And that was talked about for quite a bit. And of course, what we're talking about today in today's conversation is the same fact about, this blood quantum requirement of 1/4 that we have now, and looking at different scenarios such as lineal descent. And we have President Richard Peterson coming on, and he's going to be talking about how does the tribe, Central Council of Tlingit Haida Indian Tribes of Alaska, how do they determine who can be a tribal citizen, in regards to the same thing of how do you prove it? So it's a discussion that's been happening, like you said, Nicole, since the beginning of this legislation, December 18th, 1971, when it was signed into law. It's always been, I guess it's been really, we've been functioning under the definition imposed upon us through that legislation. When they said, we're going to decide who's going to be Native or not through this definition of blood quantum. And we've been kind of operating under that ever since. But as President Peterson will tell you, he talks about sovereignty a lot. It's the ability for a group to make its own decisions, especially when it comes to identifying and who you are and who can be a part of this organization. And that's something I feel strongly about, is that we should be able to say what we consider, who can be shareholders or not. Ultimately, the decision, of course, is up to the shareholders, and that's a decision that shareholders have made in the past and will continue to make in the future.
Well, it's a really good thing to remember that part of this conversation was getting the input from shareholders and listening to the concerns that shareholders had. And at that time, remember, this is back in 2006, 2007, had plenty of demographic studies done, and there were projections for how many descendants might enroll. And that was the concern that balanced the impact to future distributions and future dividends. And so, adding that all into the mix and finding a solution that reflects our cultural value of balance in all things and not wanting to throw anything out of balance, there were an estimated 12,000 to 13,000 descendants who would have been eligible to enroll. And here we are nearly 15 years later, and only half of that number has enrolled. Of all of the qualifications and all of the eligibility requirements you had to meet, there are still about 6,000 shareholder descendants who are eligible right now, who have not enrolled yet. So even though there was very good planning, really great discussion, and cultural solutions that struck balance in this approach, the actual numbers that came through the door did not add up to what had been expected at the time. So that's just sort of an important note to remember as we go forward, even when we have studies about, demographics and how many potential could be eligible. That doesn't mean that is the first rush in the first year that's going to come through the door. Our experience now has shown us that it's been a little bit slower than that. And part of that original conversation, it was important to have the balance of opinion also. of reasons that folks supported it, reasons that folks opposed it. All of that was presented to shareholders in the entire sort of spectrum of opinions that people would have about it. And that balance is a value that we hold now and will into the future. And so information about this topic, there is a spread of opinion. Sealaska has done a great job sharing some of the quotes that we have from shareholders about blood quantum. And we've got a little more information, I think, on what the potential versus actual actually added up to be.
Right. Yeah, I remember much discussion about the anticipated effects of dilution, stock dilution. And as you said, the projected numbers that were put out there, where we never reached them. And also, you take into consideration when you look at the dividend, how the dividend is created. We have increasing revenue, and with increasing revenue, that goes into the dividend policy, and that makes up part of the dividend. So we have a lot of variables here to consider, and just it's hard to predict in the future how many more shoulders we'll have. So it's an estimate. But like you said, it's you taking these into consideration, the pros and cons of what it means when you take actions like this. Now, I'm guessing Nicole and I could keep talking about this because we're pretty passionate about it, but we better stay on the agenda and hand it over to the next section.
Right. I think that's going to be Anthony.
Okay, thank you.
Actually, it's back to me for a minute.
Oh.
Sorry, you're not rid of me yet. So I'm going to talk briefly about blood quantum across other tribes and ANCs, and then kick it off to President Peterson to share a little bit about what Tlingit and Haida Indian tribes of Alaska has done. I do want to say that the idea of blood quantum came in the late 1700s and early 1800s. It was really a means by which the federal government could limit the eligible individuals, Native people who could qualify for land allotments or other benefits that was going to be provided by the federal government. The Indian Reorganization Act of 1934 also had blood quantum referenced, but at that time, there was a recognition that the tribe should have an opportunity for self-determination to define their own membership and citizenship. So as it currently stands, tribes and Alaska Native corporations through the Indian Reorganization Act and through INCSA can define who belongs or who is a member of their tribe or corporation. There has been this issue under consideration for many years by other regional corporations. A majority continue to have the 1/4 blood quantum requirement. That includes Sealaska. The only two that have removed that requirement were Arctic Slope Regional Corporation and Chilista. And they opted to include those born after 1971 through their corporations and by a vote of the shareholders. There are various requirements that we have found that tribes and ANCs use throughout the country. The one that is most in use is lineal descendant. That means there's no actual blood quantum level requirement. You just need to document that you're a descendant of an original enrollee or an original shareholder. Among the lower 48 tribes, we've found that approximately 1/3 use lineal descent and do not use a specific blood quantum. You also have others who use different levels of blood quantum, an 1/8, a 16th. There are others that use this, and this is, I would say, a majority of tribes in the lower 48 use something lower than 1/4. 1/4 is the current standard we use at Sea Alaska for new enrollees, and many in Alaska still use. Only 7% of the lower 48 tribes require this level of blood quantum, 1/4. And very few tribes require 1/2 or more for the enrollment. And I do want to emphasize this is not a new issue, and it's not unique to Sea Alaska. Others have had to wrestle with this issue. So we're going to call on our very own President Peterson to talk a little bit about what the tribe does here in Southeast Alaska, the regional tribe, Tlingit and Haida Indian Tribes of Alaska. So President Peterson, are you available to share your insights on this issue?
Thank you, Jaylene. I got to say, just as a shareholder and everything, I've really enjoyed this conversation, listening to Nicole and Morgan. I'm really thankful that you're hosting and having this conversation. You know, Morgan even touched on it. Tlingit and Haida is a sovereign nation. We exercise our sovereignty by defining who is eligible to be a tribal citizen for ourselves. You know, we're matrilineal people, for one, and blood quantum isn't something you consider. It's who your mother is, who her mother is, on and on, you know, and we can do that back for over 10,000 years. So next slide. I think it's important to say for thousands of years, our ancestors have never defined identity by what is in our blood alone. We are and have always been clan people. And I think it's important to even say our federally recognized tribal governments, ANC, are a colonial concept. And, you know, the idea of blood quantum is a colonial concept. It's one to, I think, eventually extinguish who we are. Next slide. Tlingit Haida's Title 15, which is our enrollment statute, has always enrolled tribal citizens by lineal descent. We do track blood quantum, but you don't use it for enrollment. In 2020, the enrollment committee and I met and we discussed and decided to remove the blood quantum from our tribal IDs. There is special consideration for blood quantum requirements for marine mammal hunting. Sorry about that. And so we do track and can provide proof of a quarter Alaska Native blood for the purpose of hunting marine mammals. And I can tell you, we've been working for years along with Rosita Worrell from Sea Alaska Heritage Institute and Sea Alaska to advocate that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife actually get rid of that blood quantum as well, because it's not actually a law, it's their interpretation. So, you know, our congressional delegation and others have wanted to strike that away as well, because, you know, as we know, if you're raised hunting and fishing, you know, if I married or had children with a non-Native woman now, my children wouldn't be able to practice, you know, harvesting sea otters, for example, and that's something we've done since time immemorial. Next slide. Tracing blood quantum and setting blood quantum requirements is a tool of abolishment and erasure rather than preservation. Assimilation and extermination tactics to remove our children from their identity. And I think it's something that I deal with as the president of Tlingit and Haida quite often. You know, a lot of our children were removed from our native homes. That was a practice done for generations since colonialism. It's a practice still happening today. We see, you know, child welfare protective services remove our children and place them in non-native homes. And those children don't know who they are. I've had encounters with folks who, you know, they know they came from our region. They know that they think they're Tlingit or Haida, Tsimshian, but they don't know. They think, I'm some kind of animal. I don't know what that means. You know, those kind of things. And to me, that's the perfect tool of assimilation and an eraser of who we are, our culture. And so, you know, by enrolling bilingual descent, we're able to connect people back to their roots, to their families, so that they know who they are. And, you know, I come from a small village on Prince of Wales, very proud of my culture, my identity, and who I am. I can't imagine having ever been removed, not knowing, made to feel less than because of this colonial tactic. This is not traditional. This is not our way of life. This is another tool that's been really successful for some, you know, areas. And I think that, you know, when we can give our identities, you know, give our children back their identities, give them names, adopt them, do whatever you need to so that they have their identity. I mean, that's who we are as Tlingit, Haida, Tsimshian people. It's not something anybody else, it's like our sovereignty. You can't give or take it. It's not something you can give or take. It's who we are. That's something, whether you're a Sea Alaska shareholder or a Tlingit Haida tribal citizen, that's, you know, those are all Western colonial constructs that, hey, I defend every day the sovereignty of our tribe because that's the tool given us to defend the sovereignty of our clan people, who we truly are. And we must never forget that. And we shouldn't let these tools separate us and divide us any further. You know, I'm so proud of to be a shareholder, to see the direction that we're going in and the conversations that are happening so that we can eradicate this assimilation tool, this weapon of mass destruction of blood quantum. It divides us, and we shouldn't let anybody divide us. And Chief Hawa for this opportunity again to be here to participate and share a few words with you all tonight.
That is Gunakchish Hawa. You always bring the house down, President Peterson. Love the hands in the air and the yeses from the audience. You speak from your heart, and you speak a truth, and you speak a deep perspective based off of who we are as a people, and that needs to be a voice in this conversation. And so happy that you accepted the invitation to join us tonight. And you know, you bring that passion, and if let's just assume that passion kind of led the way, right? You know, we get to a vote of the shareholders, and the shareholders just pile behind that passion because they have that same passion, and we get this passed. It can't be part of the whole entire process. So we need to also hear the concerns that we know are out there, and put just as much thought to addressing those concerns as we are in kind of confirming and elevating the individual perspectives each of us have on what blood quantum means. And so with that, I have, you know, just some additional numbers to throw out there. We want everybody to have a full perspective on the ramifications and the implications of moving towards lineal descent. But I will say, add my own kind of personal perspective. It's really hard for Sea Alaska, for me personally, when someone comes up to me and says, why can I be a Tlingit and Haida tribal citizen, but I can't be a Sea Alaska shareholders? That is real to me. It's a difficult conversation. It's heartfelt. And I don't think that feeling needs to be there. Tlingit and Haida is our closest and strongest partner. We represent the same people, but in some instances we don't. And so that's definitely part of this conversation. Your own story of how, even, with lineal descent, you create connectedness, you create identity for your tribal citizens. It's everything that we would like to do the same for our shareholders. And so the next number I'm going to throw out there, 10,500. It's just an estimate, but any data kind of has different meaning to how each individual may think about that. But if we think of the potential for somewhere between 10,500 to 12,500 eligible descendants available if the shareholders vote to open the rolls for lineal descent, we've heard two strong responses from our shareholder base. One is, wow, that is a lot of people who I support in becoming Sealaska shareholders. That number makes me feel like there's a lot of people not participating in something that they should. It's a number that highlights a lot of individuals that may not have the connectedness I as a shareholder has with Sealaska, with Sealaska heritage, with our communities, with any number of factors. It is a real number. I'm sure while it's a big number, there are some of you with us today online, and the connectedness and the inclusiveness is one side of that number, the want to create that inclusiveness. But the other side of that number is the financial reality that if Sealaska and our shareholders voted to move towards lineal descent, that the eligibility of all those additional shareholders would begin to dilute our share count. And the main factor in dilution is our dividend at this point. Voting power is also a diluting factor, and we've heard that from our shareholders, and we want to work on addressing both of those. So as we continue to hear the concerns, Morgan and Nicole pointed out that dilution was a real effect and a real concern of our shareholders during the Class D discussion. And one of the main concerns was the dilution effect on our elders. And from working on how do we potentially address that, we were able to come up with the Class E elder stock, and that has significantly limited the dilution on our elders to have that extra 100 shares that could be added to their original share ownership. And that almost eliminated dilution from the bulk of our elders. Morgan also mentioned the other factor that we have in terms of limiting dilution. That is just continuing to create stronger financial performance from our businesses and our investments. And that is one that we want to highlight, even though we faced upwards of 30% dilution from the Class D stock decision of our shareholders. Dividends on a per share basis are greater in 2021 than they were back in 2007. So the positive financial performance is another factor that allows us to limit the effect of dilution. And what we hope is that as we continue to hear from our shareholders, we're able to follow the voice of the values that are expressed, the voice of the passion of connectedness and inclusiveness, the voice of how this could benefit Sealaska while at the same time addressing concerns. And so it's not a conversation or a opportunity to address every solution and concern tonight. It takes a long process. Morgan mentioned the time period 2004 to 2007 that Class D took. We have little shorter time period, but that's why you're hearing from us so frequently on this issue. And when we close, I'm going to have the opportunity to highlight some of the next opportunities to meet with us. We're also going to continue to share viewpoints of others who know this issue so well. President Peterson mentioned the work of Rosita Worrell in highlighting the effect of the blood quantum administrative requirement on the MMPA, the ability to hunt seal, sea otter, other marine mammals. She's put a lot of work into this. We have a lot of data to just show the inevitable move higher in percentages of our shareholder base that are under 1/4 blood quantum. And in fact, in 2004, we have some studies that we'll be able to share on the just decade after decade increase in the number of shareholders who would be under a 1/4 blood quantum. And the Census Bureau has data. And in fact, a pretty stark data point for me personally, in 2080, 28, it seems like a long way off. It's over 50 years away, but we know that it's just a couple of generations of our people. The US Census Bureau is assuming that 96% of Alaska Natives will be under 1/4 blood quantum. So only 8% would be above. And so whether we tackle this decision now or later, the inevitable drop in our blood quantum that is occurring and that we are seeing will make us have this conversation at some point in a much more heightened fashion. So having it now is a great time, getting ahead of any growth in those potential shareholders who don't feel included, who are missing out on the opportunity to link into Sea Alaska and other Native entities and feel connected. So I just wanted to share some of that data because we need to have it out there. I will say that we are continuing to refine that estimate of 10,500 to upwards of 12,500 potential new enrollees. We're going to hire experts that can help us with that assessment. Of course, birth rates flow into that equation and many different assumptions. So we're going to refine that, and as data is refined and improved, we will bring that back to you, the shareholders, and again, many different formats, written formats, online formats, and live formats like we are part of today. And so with that, I believe we have time for questions and answers that we've collected from the audience, and our team is sending me some of them, and we'll see if we can address them. So the first one is actually one we hear a lot, and maybe Jaylene can address. Is there anything that Sea Alaska can do for those of us who cannot obtain blood quantum cards now? What resources are out there? And this is a real issue. I would say that the difficulty of getting your blood quantum card is actually one of the reasons why we see such a, from that estimate of 12,000 eligible to only 6,000 signed up. I would say the difficulty of getting your CIB is part of the reason why we have seen the inability to reach our estimate in terms of number of Class D enrollments. But Jaylene works on policy, and in fact, the BIA almost at one point wanted to stop providing CIB cards. Is that right, Jaylene? Can you comment on our work to make sure that it's not our process, but we want the BIA to provide our shareholders the pathway to something that is important? And also, you can comment on the usability of T&H's own tribal cards in our process.
Yes, thank you, Anthony. We have heard about the difficulty of getting CIB cards, and there was at one point an effort to close down the Juneau location and other offices to get that information. We and others fought hard to keep that office open so that those could be provided, so that you could actually get
time for questions and answers that we've collected from.
Oops. Not sure, technical difficulties. So we did work to keep those offices open. The good thing about the CIB cards is it shows all of your Alaska Native blood if you're more than one tribe. But we do accept now, since the past, within the past 6 months, I believe, maybe even more than that, tribal ID cards as well that show blood quantum. So if you did request T&H or another tribe in Alaska to include your blood quantum of 1/4 or more, we will accept a tribal ID card as well to show your blood quantum of 1/4 under the current standard. I would emphasize though, if you're a quarter Tlingit, but also a quarter Athabascan, we're only going to have on your records at Sealaska the 1/4 that you show us from Tlingit and Haida, or from whatever other tribe you're enrolled with. We also, I know there are times where the BIA's records are wrong. Sometimes we have a sibling with the correct blood quantum and another who's is incorrect and it's lower. We often have people apply, even though their BIA CIB shows that they're less than 1/4, or their children are less than 1/4, and then provide us with supplemental documents in an appeal process to show us what their actual blood quantum should be. So even if your CIB is wrong, if you have some other data that we can look at on appeal, we will also include shareholders whose BIA information is incorrect. I think that covers what the question was. And if you have any further follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to me or shareholder relations.
So here's another good question. How would Sealaska adapt to serving a broader shareholder base, some that have been assimilated from their culture? And I think I'll start, and I'm sure we all have comments on this, but we already serve our broad lineal descent shareholder base. You don't have to be a shareholder to receive a Sealaska scholarship. You just have to prove that you are a lineal descendant. The bulk of Sealaska Heritage's programs, all their cultural programs, from baby Raven Reads to language programming, to arts, to weaving, to carving, all of their programs that they offer our shareholders, we do not have any blood quantum requirement. Lineal descendants can already be part of these programs that our shareholders prioritize. The one effect would be the dividend. We kind of talked about that a bit in terms of, yes, there will be dilution, but our continued want to create stronger financial results will help offset that. But would open it up to others to especially directors, on how you believe that a larger shareholder base will still be able to serve successfully by Sealaska.
Thanks, Anthony. I'll go ahead and just add a few points to that. Sealaska, of course, also has its internship program, and as we potentially seek to add interns that are younger stages in their education, we want to make sure that our youth are aware of Sealaska and are aware of the opportunities there. And I could see, reaching down into lineal descendancy as we try to reach out to folks who are still in early high school, even in middle school, in grade school. So just being able to continue providing not just the benefits, but the awareness and the connection to Sea Alaska is something that we work at every day. There are people who are enrolled shareholders at Sea Alaska that we really work hard to try to stay connected to and keep them engaged in the corporation. Every year you hear us talk about how owning voting shares gives you that voice in the direction of Sea Alaska. And that's something that we want to keep mindful of as we move through our generations. That's one of the biggest platforms that our shareholders have is in their votes and their involvement with the company. Thank you.
Anthony, as you know, we're in all 50 states. Our shareholders are everywhere. We're around the world. We serve those folks now in our heart. When we have a shareholder community meeting, or maybe a Christmas party, or any events hosted by Sea Alaska, we don't check blood quantum at the door. We know when you're coming here, you're part of the shareholder family. Now, there could be children who come and they're not shareholders, but that's not how I think, And so if anything, it really is going to make our jobs easier, that we don't ever have to have that conversation like you mentioned earlier, referencing why can they be a tribal citizen but not a shareholder. I know I've heard stories from our shareholder relations department where we've had cultural camps. Maybe it's a basketball camp, and all are invited. And then we'll have folks talking about, are you enrolled as a shareholder? And they've had to have some tough conversations about them not being able to enroll as a Class D descendant stock shareholder because they didn't meet that requirement of 1/4 blood. So if it was lineal descent, that conversation would not have to be had. So.
No, that's great. And I want to hit on the ending of the question, the fact that some that have been assimilated from their culture may be able to enroll now. And in most instances that I know, they were not assimilated by their own free will. Whether their parents were adopted out, whether there were BIA programs that sent their grandmother out of Alaska. These are situations that were not created by them. And further, our intern program is open to any shareholder in lineal descent of an original shareholder. And we have folks from Florida, never been to Alaska, don't know their clan, but they have a glimmer of a connection. I've been told that my grandma was from Cake. And then you introduce them to someone from Cake. They start learning about their culture. We've had a number of interns move to Alaska that had never been here before. The ability to reconnect with your culture is real. And so we never want to lose that opportunity, even though someone may be currently disconnected. The door should always be open in my mind. And I saw President Peterson's hand up.
Thank you, Anthony. I feel reluctant to chime in because it seems like a Sea Alaska business, but I think Sea Alaska and Tlingit Haida are working really hard to operate from tribal values, cultural values that define us and separate us. And I think our values go back to our clan. We're matrilineal people, and I think we all need to uncle and auntie up, and that's in our practices. Again, to provide that. When you talk about folks who have been assimilated, well, let's re-assimilate them into our culture. Let's bring them back because it's in their DNA. Our culture is in our DNA. And I like you, I grew up in the village, and I remember cousins coming home and the excitement of catching fish and seeing eagles. And I was always shocked at how they'd be so excited to see an eagle, like I'm like, oh, we see them every day, and all these connections. But we can give that, and that should be our cultural value. I think that operates, and we redefine ourselves. your job is to make money and provide dividends is the common belief. But that's a belief that was prescribed on us by other people. Our belief could be to build and to restore our culture so that the richness and the wealth that we come from naturally, we're rich people by our own definitions, not by somebody else's. To give that to our citizens, our shareholders, our clan members is what we should be doing. And I see that happening now. And I think that there's a lot we can do collectively, and see Alaska and Tlingit Haida, and not just, what, I don't represent all the tribes. There's other tribal leaders, but I can tell you, See Alaska has been working not with just Tlingit Haida, but with our village tribes, and we all have a role in this, and we can all be about building back better, to steal a term, right? But that term resonates with me, not because of politics, but because that's what we should be doing for our people, building better, building opportunities. A new mantra at Tlingit Haida is to meet our citizens where they're at. That was the question that, Morgan was answering really with the shareholders. It's you can call me a shareholder, a tribal citizen. I am Kagwantan. That's who I really am. And that's the bond that we all have with each other. And, and I look at my Eagle brothers and sisters, we pay homage and respect to our opposites and the Ravens. That's something that we need to really be teaching and bestowing, and we can do that. And, it's easy for me to say, hey, I don't really care about a dividend. So I don't mean to disparage that sentiment, but we can build more than a check. We can build more than social services. We can build our culture back and again restore that wealth and build off of that wealth that we come from.
Fantastic. And you're a shareholder, so always very willing to have you speak on your thoughts on Sea Alaska. We really respect that. I think these are some quick ones. Maybe not, maybe so. Are you changing the minimum blood quantum to be a shareholder? The conversation is about removing blood quantum as an eligibility requirement and going to lineal descent, but the outcome cannot be created by Sea Alaska. It's a shareholder vote. So if that action occurs, it's the action of our shareholder base, and that is why these conversations are so important. Sea Alaska is not going out there and saying we're doing this and just making it unilaterally. It's the voice and vote of the shareholders that will make this action happen. We have another question. If someone is Tsimshian, not enrolled with Metlakatla Indian community, are they eligible to enroll with Sea Alaska? At a high level, yes. If you meet the eligibility requirements that currently include a quarter blood quantum of Alaska Native. I know that there are some issues with Canadian-born Tsimshian, but the best avenue is to, I believe we put it in the chat, reach out to our shareholder relations department. They'll be able to definitively answer you, but at a high level, yes. Very similar. My son is a quarter Indian. I don't know if that is Tlingit. And at 1/16 Indian, 1/16 Tsimshian, is it true he doesn't meet the blood quantum? This is a tricky one. I don't want to answer definitively because, again, calling our shareholder relations would be best. There is issue if you are 1/16 Alaska Native, which does include Tsimshian, and then 1/16 American Indian from the lower 48, you are under the 1/4 blood quantum requirement. Another very difficult conversation that we've had because of this blood quantum requirement. So I'm not answering that question definitively tonight, but want you to reach out to our shareholder relations department, give the details that that you have, and they'll be able to answer you definitively. Somewhat similar. Thank you, Leilani, for being with us tonight. She recognized the fact that the quarter blood quantum as a shareholder eligibility does not apply to gifting or inheritance. So we do have lineal descents who are under 1/4 blood quantum right now that are shareholders through gifting and inheritance. It's a good concept to point out that we don't have as many as the 12,000 that we mentioned, because not everybody is willing and gifting. And one of the difficulties with relying on gifting and inheritance is someone could spend the bulk of their adult life with no shares as their parents hold their shares until passing. And that's just not an ideal situation to be 55, 60, 65, finally getting your Sealaska shares. That's a whole lifetime of being disconnected. So it's not it's another situation that we see and face. She continues to ask, are we dropping this requirement just for Class D? And that's great clarification. And maybe I'll ask Jaylene to answer, because the answer is yes. Maybe a little bit of the why, the potential to just make an amendment to drop this eligibility for a Class D. Could you comment on that, Jaylene?
I can, but we're only speaking hypothetically because we don't have a proxy. We don't have anything actually written up. We are still in the information seeking phase to see what shareholders might be interested in having us do in the future. I think most of this discussion has been around descendant stock. There are other stocks that, such as left out, or we also have the 5 landless communities who aren't enrolled. So there's other considerations, but left out is really for those shareholders who were eligible at the time of ANCSA with 1/4 blood quantum, but just missed the deadline for whatever reason. So we aren't including that because they did have to include or be a part of the original requirements of ANCSA. So I will say that right now we're really only talking about descendant stock as a possibility, but we do need to hear from shareholders on whether or not we include that on the ballot and whether or not we use descendancy or some other standard. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, no, great. I mean, great detail that as we continue along this conversation and we continue to hear the concerns and think of new solutions to address any concern that may come from the specific details, we have the opportunity to be flexible and put forward a solution that matches the wants and concerns of our shareholder base, knowing that it's a conversation that we want to keep focused on the quarter blood quantum, but there's many avenues to address shareholder concern and misunderstanding through this process. And I don't see any additional questions coming my way, so I'll take the opportunity to just highlight additional events that are coming up. On November 17th, it's another evening event, 6 to 7:30 p.m. Alaska time. We're going to have a panel discussion. Look for more information on who the panelists will be. Again, we're going to try and get new voices in front of the shareholders. We have live informal surveys that are being compiled by our communications team, and the voices of our shareholders within those surveys will be addressed in all future communications and at the panel discussion, along with many other topics. The question is simple. I believe the informal survey asks, share your story in your own words of how blood quantum impacts your life. All those that have already been part of that, Gunakchi Shawa, Deutschem Newsum, for including your story, your voice. It's often personal, but it's meaningful to us. In December, as we continue to hear from shareholders, we're going to want to get finer detail on shareholder thoughts and concerns in broader detail. So we're going to have another shareholder survey that has a higher number of shareholders reached out to for their thoughts on, again, a set of questions that allow us to continue to refine and define this conversation in a manner that gets everybody's voices. So look out for all of that information. If we missed a question here tonight, you can email corpcom, CORPCOMM @seaalaska.com. Any unanswered questions that you would like us to answer, please email that to us. And I believe we have time for some closing comments and Gunakchishes and Howas and Deutsche Newsoms to all those that came today. But I would like to give our panelists some closing comments, and I'll start in reverse order. I've done my comments, so I believe this will be the last you hear from me, but we'll go Jaylene, Morgan, Nicole, and President Peterson, some closing comments. And I'll just end by saying Gunakchish for adding your voice and thoughts to this. I know you each bring your perspectives, but you're looking at this in a really balanced manner, and I hope that came across.
Chish, Anthony, thank you shareholders and prospective shareholders for logging in to hear the discussion. I know there may be some other questions that came in after we close. I don't want you to feel like this is the end of the dialogue or the end of the opportunity for answers to your questions. We have shareholder relations available, and they know how to reach me if there's specific questions for legal. But I just want to say thank you for the time and for listening, and thank you for the opportunity to serve all of you. It's just been at my pleasure, and hope to talk to you all again soon. I'm going to hand it off to President Peterson. Tag, you're it.
Geez, I'll just repeat myself. As a shareholder, I'm immensely proud of our corporation for beginning these conversations. I think people use the word decolonize, and I don't think they usually know what it means. But I think these efforts are like decolonizing our mindset. Tlingit and Haida, Sealaska, our village corporations, our village tribes, we all need to work together to do more for our people, to restore and to build on who we are. And I'm really thankful to be invited and to participate tonight. And I was just reading the comments, and Nicole mentioned the Sealaska logo. And this might be unpopular because I know people had an affinity, affection for the old logo, but this was decolonization. This was us embracing our own instead of hiring a non-native consulting firm to design our logos. This is a beautiful message in this logo. I'm a huge supporter of that. Decolonize our mindset, open our doors to our relatives, and bring them home. And I don't necessarily mean physically, but by being there for our people, for being that resource, for being the aunties and uncles that our younger generation needs. That's what our role is. And I'm so proud of working together with our corporations and our tribes to do that. We won't always agree on everything, but we are the same people. And don't let those ideals of divide and conquer win anymore. And that's to our audience. We should all, when we're together, we're going to be that bundle of sticks that can't be broken when they're in a bundle. So gonna choose how.
Anthony, I think you said that I would be next, but just to amplify the messages that we've already heard, this is the year This year, we're celebrating the 50th year of ANCSA. Next year, Sealaska will see its 50th year of being incorporated. We really are thinking of what these next 50 years will look like. And I think the biggest question we have is, how do we stay connected? How do we stay connected culturally to each other? How do we help our communities thrive? And this conversation is just part of those bigger questions as we look forward. And I'm so grateful for the time that everybody has shared getting together with us. Ganesh Tish Awa.
I'd say it's up to us, shareholders. It's up to us to find a path forward for this organization. You are all owners of Sealaska. How do you want your corporation to be? Jaylene talked about all of the amendments that were made to ANCSA throughout the years. That's because when it first started, it was this very odd foreign structure put upon us so we can obtain our land. And ever since then, we've been trying to figure out how to make it work. I really appreciate President Peterson being in this conversation. I completely agree with you about the constructs of the tribe and the constructs of a corporation. What's below that? What is below that? What foundation is below that? Our clan structure system. And I think of our values like Ha-Shagun, our value of Ha-Shagun, to take into consideration our ancestors and our descendants and weigh them accordingly with our present generation, make our decisions considering those who came before us and those who have come after us. I think this conversation is right in line with that value. That value is who we are, which is a foundational value. And the constructs of a tribe and a corporation, these are the vehicles and the tools that we live our lives through. And we hopefully make positive change, positive impacts. Because as a tribal citizen and a delegate, and as a shareholder, in my work, my mission is the same: healthier communities, healthier people, healthier future generations, our children to be better off than we are today. So when we talk about a decision like this, removing blood quantum, maybe going towards no descent, this is a change that it's going to require all shareholders. It's going to be all shareholders to have it's going to be up to all shareholders. That's the only way things like this happen. So I'm excited. Talking about this to me is actually fulfilling our mission. That's how I feel about it. These conversations are part of fulfilling our mission, our joint mission, I believe, about moving us down a healthier path. I could talk all day about it, but we've come to the end of our time. So thank you, shareholders. Thank you, everybody. I'm not sure if Dixie's going to close this out. I'm very grateful to be part of this. Ganesh Awa Toyaksunt Nusam.
Chish to all of you. All of your comments made me just reflect on the fact that there's a lot of passion, and we want our shareholders to be talking amongst each other. And you're going to find someone that disagrees with you, and we don't want your passion to overwhelm a good conversation and listening to an alternative viewpoint. So being respectful in all of these conversations, being willing to hear out the concerns of others is really important to us. But most important is you being willing to have these conversations with your friends and families, and broadening your perspective on this issue in a very respectful manner that I hope was highlighted by our panelists today. So again, Gunachish to everybody joining, Gunachish Hawa Dokship Newsome to our panelists.